So we will wrap up our discussion of Lophotrochozoa with the annelids. The annelid phylum is segmented worms. These are also called roundworms. And so here we see a new development, segmentation. And the segments are these tiny little rings, and each ring is separated by the septum, right? So here you can see in this depiction of an earthworm that the small segments are individual pieces, and they have short little septum that separate the one segment from the next. The way this is helpful is the column can allow the adjustment of the amount of fluid in each section, and that's how earthworms move. They move with a hydrostatic skeleton. They have these tiny little hairs called setae, and they attach to the surface that they're on, and they just shift the amount of water or fluid in each of the segments to allow it to contract or expand, and it allows the earthworm to kind of inch along and move. You also see that large section called the clitellum, and the large section in between the segments that stands out is where the digestive organs are held. You can see that the earthworm does have a head end with a mouth and a brain. It does have 5 hearts and a circulatory system, and it does have an excretory system, which are those nephridium. Like I was saying, all the digestive organs are in that clitellum, that large segment. And the segments are all connected together with circulatory and nervous system running through all along. And then as well, each section can offer the excretory or transport of the fluid holding the important things that the worm parts would need, nutrients and things like that, between them. So the septum are important because those segments allow the hydrostatic skeleton to work, and also allows for specialization, like that system of digestion. The segmentation also allows a repetition. So if a worm is cinched in half, like it breaks off a piece, it can regenerate part of itself and still function, still continue to survive. The double transport system is the circulatory system and that fluid inside the column that carry all the nutrients and wastes like we were talking about. The digestive system is complete, and it's in that clitellum. And then finally, the sexual reproduction involves 2 individuals. Some are hermaphroditic, but most do an internal fertilization from a different worm. They can reproduce asexually by fission, and all annelids except leeches have those setae on every segment to keep it still in order to shift its fluids to be able to inch along and move each of those setae. Oop, I actually meant septum. So the annelids have 2 main clades, the Arantia, which are free-ranging predators. They have really long setae, so you can actually see them like little bristles, and they're kind of almost like parapodia, which are feet, and they're bright colors, and they look more like centipedes and millipedes than annelid worms, roundworms. The other are sedentaria, which are the tube worms like earthworms and leeches, and the setae are so close to the body, they're just for anchoring, and their head is very, very small. You can't even really tell the head end from the tail end necessarily in these particular organisms. The sister group to the Lophotrochozoa are the Ecdysozoa, and they are separate from the Lophotrochozoa. They have a molting period where they shed an exoskeleton, like this image in the top right corner of a dragonfly, right? They're getting rid of the old skeleton and forming a new, bigger version of its body. All ecdysozoans all have a non-living cuticle, and it supports and protects them, but when they outgrow it, they have to shed it to create a new one. The two most common phyla we see are nematodes and arthropoda. And so arthropods are like insects and crustaceans, and then nematodes are the roundworms. Some have metamorphosis, like butterflies, dragonflies, things like that, right? The complete metamorphosis would be like the butterfly and ladybug that actually dissolves itself and becomes something new. The incomplete, it sheds molts off its cuticle stage and becomes anew. And then the gradual would be more like the cricket, right? Or a cockroach, things like that. So these roundworms, nematodes, are usually, they are deleterious to humans. They periodically shed their skin or cuticle, which is kind of like a tough collagen. If you think about the collagen in your nose and in your ears, it's kind of that tougher material that makes them a little more protective. They have a pseudocolum, which acts as a hydrostatic skeleton, just like the earthworms did, and the circulatory system. Their digestive tract is complete, and they do have a mouth, so they do eat. They have muscles, but they're not like you would think. They don't go around the worm. They extend longwise down the worm, and they do reproduce sexually, separate male and female, and they have internal fertilization. For development, it's very easy to see these organisms because the bottom one, they're clear. You can see right through them. And so scientists like to study them because they can see what's going on in all the organs and organ systems, and they have a very quick generation time for C. elegans. The nematodes that are parasitic that we find in humans very often are things like Ascaris lumbricoides. These are intestinal worms, and so what happens is, like, little kids get this a lot because it would be they ate something off the ground or something that had been touched by soil, and then they wind up with these intestinal worms. Or the Nectator americanus is a hookworm, and if you're walking barefoot through like feces, it can be taken up from walking through soil that had feces in it. And then pinworms, they live in the gut, and they're excreted in feces as well. And so sometimes what happens in small children is if they get any kind of fecal material at all anywhere on them, it can be ingested. And that's Enterobius vermicularis. And then Wucheria bancrofti causes elephantiasis, and we see this a lot more in third world countries than we do in first world countries like the United States. And now we're finally to the arthropods, and those are like insects, and the segmented body parts are starting to arise. So we see that they are a very successful phylum. In fact, 3/4 of all currently described species are arthropods. So they have a body plan that allows them to live in most biomes. Their exoskeleton is made of chitin, this special protein that's very, very sturdy. And it's tough, but it's also flexible. And it's pretty impermeable to water. So they keep water out when they don't want it leaking through. The most important thing we see arise is this segmentation of body parts and cephalization. And so they have a head, they have a thorax, an abdomen, right? And these are called tagmata, and they are fused together body parts, which help with them having separate functionality in each section. So some of the systems and organ systems that we see are in different sections of the body. The extensive cephalization means they have a really good sight, smell, hearing, touch, balance. They have senses in all of these sensory organs. In a lot of arthropods, they have compound eyes and a sophisticated brain, which has cerebral ganglia with several other smaller ventral ganglia. They offer an open circulatory system, and they use gas exchange through gills and a tracheal system. In crickets, we see spiracles, and some organisms have book lungs instead, but we also see a complex digestive system, and they have excretory system that's complete. So they do have separate tubules, or like the worms had, the nephridia. These are metanephridia, and it's going to be their excretory system. We also see Chelicerata as a subphylum, and these are spiders or things with pinchers, right? And so they have two tagmata. So they have a cephalous thorax, which is a head and thorax in one, and then they also have an abdomen. They have 6 pairs of appendages, 4 pairs of walking legs, and pedipalps. These are like pinchers, right, or different sensory organs like antenna. And then they have chelicera, which are their fangs. And they are spiders, scorpions, and little mites and ticks, things like that. And then we see the Myriapoda, which has a head and a pair of antennae, and then 3 pairs of appendages for mouth parts. And so they have like almost mandibles that act as the jaw in the millipedes and centipedes. So the Diplopoda are millipedes. They have 2 pairs of walking legs on each segment. They're very slow moving, and they eat grasses and plants. And then they have the glands on the underside of them that eject toxic secretions, and that's to get away like other insects and birds and things like that while they're trying to eat their plants or whatever. The other one are Chilopoda, which are the centipedes, and they only have 1 pair of walking legs per segment, and they move pretty fast, and they're carnivorous. So maybe the millipedes secrete their repellent to get the centipedes away. Their head has this powerful claw connected to the poison gland as well. And then we see Hexapoda, which are typically what we think of as arthropods, right? There are 3 tagmata, the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. The head has a pair of antennae, the jaw is the mandibles, and then it has 3 pairs of walking legs. And these are insects. There are over 35 orders of insects and over 100,000 species minimum. Could be well over that. The wings develop as outgrowths from the body's cuticle, and they have to molt their cuticle in order for those to present throughout development. Many of the different orders have evolved a variety of different mouth parts. So like mosquitoes have a tubular mouth part, and flies have a tubular mouth part as well. However, other things have like more of a jaw where they'll have a biting aspect to them. They reproduce sexually and have internal fertilization and male and female sexes for insects as well. Most insects undergo some kind of metamorphosis, whether it be a complete metamorphosis like the butterfly, where it completely changes into something else, or like with a cricket, right, or a grasshopper that is changing and going through different phases and molting off shells on the exterior as it's growing and outgrowing them. Here you can see a bee, and you can tell that it has the head piece with eyes and antenna and those mouth parts as well. It has a thorax, which the wings attach to and the legs attach to. And then it has an abdomen, and that's where much of its systems are, and the spiracles, which allow for gas exchange. So they have these digestive and excretory systems, a circulatory system, and in bees you can even see the stinger and the poison sac. So lots of arthropods are poisonous to other things. Maybe not all to every animal, but they are poisonous to many, many animals, and